Hey, folks, John Kelly. Welcome back, Law Enforcement Life Coach with your Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Get Matt Thomas, sitting down with Matt Thomas today. And you go, Matt Thomas, you might have heard of him. Guy's doing some amazing things, man, but he's out there in Arizona. And so, sometimes that doesn't make it around the world. Matt Thomas wrote a book called Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartel. Pick it up. I'll give you the links to it in the show notes. But man, he's out there in Arizona with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office, working out there with Sheriff Mark Lamb, and he has had his hands full, man. 30 plus years on the job, and he is taking the fight to the Mexican cartels. And we're going to do a deep dive. And if you think, you know what, everybody bitches about where they're at and what they got going on. If you think you got it rough, man, sit back and listen to this story. Matt's doing some great work, and he's going to share some of those experiences with us and really give us an overall picture on the seriousness of what we got going on at our border. All right. So without further ado, Matt, brother, thanks for the time.
Absolutely, man. Great to join you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Hey, so we've been chatting, man, and I love the book.
Thank you. Thank
you. But before we dive into all that, just give the listener, man, that what do you call it? That little synopsis, that little Reader's Digest version of you. I know you kind of grew up in that neck of the woods, man, and I kind of grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth on the North Shore of Boston, but that wasn't exactly the case for you.
No, I grew up in South Phoenix, and it seems like the south of any big city is problematic, right? So it was a little bit rough where I grew up, and
right.
I had it was primarily Mexican gangs, the neighborhoods I grew up in. So I grew up as like one white guys in my neighborhood.
Did you tan up, bro? Did you put some spray tan on? What'd you do?
No, I went with it. I was
all right, man.
But I grew up around that stuff, and kind of lived it and learned it well. And then my mom saw the writing on the wall, and so she moved me as a teen in high school. When I first started high school, she moved me out to a rural area, it had no gangs or any of that stuff, but I was right back into the Hispanic culture because it was a farming community.
Okay.
So kind of finished out high school in that small town, working the farms. I worked in the potato fields right alongside the migrants, picking potatoes. And so I've kind of been in the Mexican culture.
Dude, that's character building, man.
It is. Dude, I'll tell you, still to this day, the smell of fresh dug dirt, my stomach churns a little bit because I remember all those hours in the fields.
That post-traumatic stress, man.
Yeah, a little bit. So then I got into this career young at 20 years old.
Wow.
Jumped into law enforcement with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office here, and kind of been in it since, and just started in our jail, moved out to the road as a deputy, and then kind of went through the ranks to my current position. And I think I blame it a lot on my my ADD that I just jump positions a lot. So every 3 or 4 years, I needed to move to do something new.
Isn't it great to work for an agency that is big enough to allow you to stay in the career,
right,
but do something completely new? Like, give us some of your assignments from getting out on the road to being the undersheriff. I guess, right? I can call you undersheriff.
Yep. That's what it is around most of the country.
Okay.
So when I jumped into deputy sheriff, I did my time in patrol.
Yep.
My first specialty assignment was traffic, and so when I went into traffic, we didn't have motors then, but we were doing all the fatal accidents, all the DUI details, that kind of stuff. But our traffic unit was unique because we did a little drug interdiction too. So we would help our narc guys do drug interdiction, and that's where I got my first taste of that.
Okay.
Really liked it.
Yeah,
so
man.
I kind of focused on the drug interdiction piece, went that way. From traffic, I got recruited into undercover work, and so I moved over into being an undercover detective. And out of that, I got promoted to sergeant and went back to regular patrol, and then ended up as a sergeant. I did patrol. I did our training division, so I ran our training division for a while, and then I went to the academy and ran our academy for a while, and then I went back to undercover as the undercover sergeant.
Nice.
And did that until I got moved over back to traffic.
Right.
And when I got moved back to traffic, they wanted to stand up motors. So I was the sergeant responsible for standing up our first motor unit. I became the first motor for our agency.
Very cool, man. How many
yeah.
guys did you have on a scoot?
There was me and one other that passed the initial school. So 2 motors to start with. That was it.
Oh man, not an easy school. Not an easy school.
Not an easy school. I kept hearing how tough it was. And you know how it is when you go to assignments, most of them are either physically tough, like SWAT, you have a lot of physical stuff, a lot of shooting, those kind of skills. Motors, man, was so mental because getting through that school, you had to override your brain all the time to get those slow maneuvers and stuff.
Not natural at all.
It was not. But then once it clicks, it's like you and the bike are one, and you're like, man, why was it so hard to get here?
Throwing that thing around like it's a tricycle when you were a little kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I made a shirt for our guys that said SWAT because not everybody can be on motors.
Our motor guys would love that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's awesome. So you finished that up, and then you
finished,
just kept
motors, and I got promoted to lieutenant out of that assignment. And when I promoted to lieutenant, they put me over the SWAT team. And our SWAT team's a collateral team. So I was on the team this entire time as an operator and a sergeant. Nice. And then I got promoted to lieutenant, and I took command of the team. And then as part of that assignment, they started moving duties around. And so I had SWAT, I had undercover, and I had our anti-smuggling squad. That was all assigned to me.
Okay.
So I kind of finished out there. I was over that. I got transferred back to patrol for a short stint, and then went back to so they kind of transferred us because we had this boss at the time that really believed that you needed to get rotated out of certain positions every
don't ever develop an excellent set of skills.
Right.
No, we don't ever want to be really excellent.
So as I reached my 3rd or 4th year in SWAT, they were like, oh, well, you have to transfer because like that's a thing. And so we have to keep doing it. So they transferred me back to patrol. But then it didn't work out so well. So the SWAT stuff started to suffer. So in about a year, they transferred me back to SWAT and said, let's get it back on track.
Right.
Went back to SWAT as a lieutenant, and that's where I was when Mark won his seat as the sheriff.
Yep.
And offered me the position of undersheriff or chief deputy, and so I took that and moved into that position in 2017 and been here since.
That's awesome, brother. And just speaking to that, Sheriff Lamb, listen, I don't know him, and I don't know you, right? I mean, we know each other, we're acquaintances, right?
Right.
But I'm impressed that I think you're the kind of guy that if you told the sheriff, hey boss, this is not a good idea, man. This shit's gonna get sideways on us. Which is your role, which is what you're supposed to be doing, that he would actually listen to you.
Yeah. So I tell people all the time, they ask what is Mark Lamb like in real life? And I'm like, hey man, what you see is what you get. So people that meet him always say, God, he's so nice, he's so genuine. That's exactly why I took this job, dude. When he and I sat down for the interview, the only interaction I had ever had with him till that point was on a SWAT testing. He had tested for SWAT, and I was in charge of the SWAT team.
Sure.
So we interacted during that testing process. Outside of that, I hadn't had any more conversation. And so when he offered me the position, we sat down and we interviewed, and I felt the same thing. He's very genuine. He had a great vision for where we were headed. I was on board with that, so I jumped in.
Right.
I told him at the time, I said, hey, I've been here a long time. I know a few things. One thing I do know is I've seen sheriffs come and sheriffs go, and our relationship has to be very special. Like number one and a number two, there has to be a synergy there.
Yeah, man.
We talked that through, and to his credit, he is that kind of leader where he'll say, hey, I have this idea, here it is. And my job, I feel, is to lay out all the pit holes or pitfalls and say, hey, here's what I see, and then gives him a better vision to make an educated decision. And then there's been times where I absolutely disagree with something. And I'm like, boss, I don't agree with this. And this is why. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I tell him, like, you're the sheriff. So if you give me the order when we clear these doors, it's happening.
Right.
But here's all of my, and he'll hear me out every time. And sometimes he has changed his mind and said, you know what? I did not think of that stuff. So let's go in that direction. Yeah.
Dude, that is so, like, that's reassuring to hear, because I can tell you, and Matt, you know this, bro. We both, you're going 30 plus years. I wound up finishing after 30. The amount of people in the room that can tell the boss that he's not wearing any pants.
Yeah.
Listen, in my 30 years, I worked for 7 sheriffs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And can I tell you, none of them had somebody as their undersheriff that would ever tell them the truth.
Right.
And it hurts the organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's counterproductive, man. And so,
yeah, well, and it hurts the sheriff whether they realize it.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, South Florida is a different animal, man. You know, but I'm excited that you're in that position, and that he's got that confidence in you, because, you know, not only will that make him better, the troops, it's about our people, man. And that's a great relationship, bro.
Yep,
so
it's been great.
That's awesome to hear. I was getting into the book, and, you know, I noticed, you know, your upbringing and your early assignments really put you in a great, unique position to kind of spearhead this stuff. When we talk about cartels, listen, until I read your book, the closest contact that I had with cartels, or a base of knowledge, was End of Watch, that movie, right? You know, I'm like,
yeah,
maybe this doesn't look good, you know, with all the, and I just, when I got into the book, I was just like, this is not like East Coast dope work. This isn't like, this is a whole different animal. And we had talked before we officially started. The cartels are a Fortune 500 company. I mean, this isn't a bunch of dudes running around with sombreros, shit-faced, you know, smoking some weed and doing some coke.
No, these are very sophisticated, very violent, and very evil, in my opinion, people, which is a very bad combination, right? Because they're evil, they're violent, they have a lot of power in their country, they run that country, and they have a lot of money backing them, and it's tough, you know, as a U.S. government entity trying to combat that. I mean, just think about that. We're a government who has to follow all these rules, and like for purchasing, we have to follow all these procurement rules, and for them, they can adjust on the fly. They don't like doing something, then we'll just do it, because they're not following the law anyways. So
right. It's not like
just on the fly, and they rule by fear. They rule by intimidation. They have a very organized and regimented structure, and it's weird because looking in, and to the unknowing eye, it would look very disorganized. But when you dive into it, man, their structure is like no other, and they run it like a Fortune 500 company, just with the added violence.
Right. And we had mentioned some of that, you know, they're really, you know, so you got, the minute you hear Mexican cartels, you think dope, right? I mean, dope.
Right.
But that's like one division of the company, right? I mean,
they're diversified.
What are some other things that they're into?
So they're big into counterfeiting. So counterfeiting, when we're talking about like CDs is gonna age me, but you know, CDs.
You didn't say 8-tracks, bro. You didn't say 8-tracks, so you're all right, man.
But you know, counterfeiting, that type of stuff, counterfeiting
like merchandise,
stuff. Merchandise. They're into counterfeiting. They're stealing precious metals, golds and stuff. They'll steal that and use it as a resource, oil. They are into extortion, kidnapping, robbery, murder, obviously. They are trafficking human beings is the big thing now. They're trafficking human beings like I've never seen it before. And then, of course, drugs is their staple. That's like that's what they're known for.
Right.
They've got all this other stuff going on as well. That they are, and I was telling you earlier, they were referred to as DTOs, drug trafficking organizations. That was the government designator for Mexican cartels. They're now designated as TCOs, transnational criminal organizations, which means they are worldwide and they are a criminal. They don't just mess with drugs. They're a criminal organization involved in all crimes.
It seems like, listen, I mean, but stealing a Jack Ryan, they're a clear and present danger to the people of this country.
Oh, absolutely. Because they are in control of the country just south of us, right? So they're in control of Mexico. They have familial ties to our country because, like, if you think about our area, Arizona, this was Mexico before we moved the line, right? Before we made a land purchase. So
Right.
you have families that were here that were living in Mexico, and all of a sudden the U.S. moved the line, and now they're U.S. citizens, but they still have family further south in
Sure.
Mexico. So they have those familial ties. And then another thing that people either don't know or discount is back in the day, there were Chinese immigrants that were used as forced labor on the railroad tracks, right? And
Sure.
they were building them down into Mexico. A lot of those Chinese immigrants stayed in Mexico. And so now you have a horrible combination of Chinese familial bonds that have Chinese connections. And where do you think the chemicals come from for the stuff that they're pumping out now, the fentanyl? So they have familial bonds with Mexican citizens who are of Chinese descent, and you have Mexican cartels that need those Chinese chemicals. So, I mean, there's just this history and this network that has made them, they're interwoven into the fabric of the U.S. And as such, they operate almost with impunity because they can slide under the radar and they're just doing evil stuff. And it's killing our country. Like if you talk about fentanyl is just killing 100,000. I mean, we're over 100,000 deaths.
Right.
And I don't understand how people don't know about this. It baffles
me. And Matt, this is the first time you connected the dot with China. Like how would they? Well, because there's people that have been living in Mexico of Chinese descent for 100 years.
Right. Yeah. So
it's another network. It's a network that's been in place since that time in history.
Right.
And so they're utilizing that network.
Yeah, and you have criminal organizations obviously in China.
Right. Of
and
course.
So it's easy for those connections to be made.
That's insane, bro. I didn't even think about that. So they're involved in everything. And so you're the undersheriff. And you're tasked with protecting the people of your county. And quite honestly, it goes beyond that, because if you're the gateway, man, like
Right.
what I don't want to burst your bubble here, brother, man. But if you don't stop it and you don't catch it, it's in.
Right. Yeah. And we have no illusions.
Right.
We know that the effect that we're having on them is minimal, but nonetheless, we are acting as a blocking mechanism, and we're not going to stop fighting that fight.
Right.
And all we can do is do our part. And then like I kind of hinted to earlier in the conversation, we are pushing to our US senators and congressmen that, hey, this is a terrorist organization. You need to designate them as such, because that's going to tremendously help law enforcement. Because if they designate them as narco terrorists, it opens up a whole nother can of tools that we can use to combat them. And we get some of those special dudes that break glass in case of emergency. We get some of those dudes that start going down and doing some operations against these guys.
Be proactive. Right.
And I'll tell you, I have a buddy that is a former IDF from Israel, and we were having this discussion about how do you beat this kind of stuff? And he said, well, Americans don't want to beat it because you guys kind of just are reactive to everything. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, just take me, for instance, coming from the IDF in Israel, we actively hunt our enemies because we want them on the run. You guys wait for them to do something to you and then you react. Yeah.
That's a sad commentary on the state of the union, man.
Right.
That's what we do. So having that designation of the cartels being a narco terrorist organization brings more resources to the table and allows us to go on the offensive to have this fight before it reaches our border.
Right. And then you also have the ability to hold Mexico accountable for their complicity, right? Because whether they're going to admit it or not, they're complicit at some level. And they start getting held accountable for that. And then they start, we also have the ability to start holding corporations accountable that deal with these people.
Well, I think that's where you're going to get people's attention.
Oh yeah,
Once you start messing with people's money, man,
that's right.
you're going to have you'll never see change so quick when you start freezing bank accounts and that's crazy. It seems like, Matt, I've got pictures with Biden and Pence and Trump, and I was running those knuckleheads around back in the day. And I say this in the class that I teach is I said, it's not Republican. None of them give a shit about the American people. They really don't. I mean, like, if you were the president, you'd be like, oh, hell no, we're locking that shit down because it's affecting our people, right? There's no country in the world that allows people just to come across their border.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. But
no.
But we're not, like, again, I don't give a shit about the politics of it. It's about having a sovereign nation. It's about taking care of the good, hardworking people of this country. And hey, you want to come here? Great. There's a process because, like, we got to know. Like, we got to know who's coming here, right? Like, that should not be too much to ask.
No, we're a country formed on immigration. So yeah, we want immigration. We want people to come here and be productive members of our society. But the problem has become the whole assimilation piece too, right?
Right.
Because you're coming to the US and we're not telling you to give up your heritage or give up where you came from. We're telling you assimilate to the US way, right? So you're going to become a US citizen. You do it our way. You hold on to your heritage. That's all good. We're a melting pot.
Right.
But we have all these different narratives now that are counter all of that. And then you add in the power piece behind it. And I mean, you know it as well as I do. Any of the cops out there can see this coming. We are Rome all over again. And the problem is that the people in power right now don't, and I don't want to say all of them because there are some that care, but I'll tell you, we have Eli Crane in Arizona, former Navy SEAL, great dude, and he is up there fighting. And I talked to him, and he's already tired. It's his first year, and he's like, just tired, man, because you're fighting a machine.
You're smashing your head against the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the problem: is our government is self-serving now at the federal level instead of serving us, the people who they work for. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's it boggles the mind that we history there should be lessons learned. I mean, like, listen, when you were a rookie and you did something and you got smacked, you were like, oh shit, I ain't doing that again because I know how that's going to end, right? Little microcosm of the world. And so you get better and you see, okay, we're not going to do that. We are purposefully going down a road that's, I hate. See, whenever you say something extreme, you sound like an alarmist, but I think people think that there's no way this country could ever collapse and fail.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's foolhardy.
It is foolhardy. And there's also people that think something similar to Nazi Germany could never happen again. And that's foolhardy.
Of course.
Because it's a slow burn and you don't see it coming. It's not going to be a flip the switch kind of thing.
I have written here, man, have we become numb to this because of the nature of its evolution? It's so gradual. What is that saying? Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep. And I mean, and people also compare it to the boiling of the frog, right? If you throw them into boiling water, they're going to jump right out. But if you just put them in there and then turn the heat up, they're going to sit in there and die.
And that's unfortunately, we've got some great people in politics that are veterans and public servants and see the big picture, that are doing their damnedest. But until you remove the money, until you de-incentivize, or and right now people are putting their own wealth and profits ahead of the well-being of the country.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but I mean, the system is corrupt because the people no longer really have the power. It's the corporations and it's the money people and the lobbyists who have the
Right.
power. And so they've corrupted the whole system. And until the people actually have the power back, you're not going to
Yeah.
fix it. Because if we the people who these politicians answer to truly had the power, when they're doing some of the stuff they're doing that you see, we would be able to stand up and say, no, we're not cool with that, and you are fired.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't get that opportunity anymore. And if you do get that opportunity, now you're at a point where you're questioning, was that really legit? Did we actually remove them, or did somebody else remove them? And is it? And if you watch, there's a show, House of Cards on Netflix.
Okay.
I started watching that, and it's old, but it's all about the Washington politics. And I started watching it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so on point. But it shows all the corrupted politicians,
Right.
and all the behind the scenes crap they do to hold on to those positions. And why do you think they fight term limits? Term limits would be ideal because you're in there for a certain time, you serve your government, and you're out, and you go do something else.
Oh yeah, these career politicians that have been, have made a lifetime out of sitting in the Senate or Congress. I mean, it's a big scam, man. It's a big scam.
It is.
If you were king, brother, right?
If you were king,
if you were king, not running the show here in the United States, but just with some, maybe the cartels being designated as a narco terrorist group. What would you like to see happen for not only the betterment of law enforcement that's fighting this fight along the border and trying to get a handle on this issue? Throwing money at stuff doesn't seem to, that in and of itself that never solves a problem. There's got to be a vision. And listen, I know this is like, you're like, Jesus Christ, John, really? This is the question you're asking me?
It's all good.
Yeah. But like, what's the solution, brother? What's the and I know it's multi-tier, and I know it's not like just one thing.
Right.
But listen, you're in the trenches, you're on the front line. There's no denial about what's going on. And usually that's the first obstacle. Like, what's the truth? Dealing with the truth. Well, you know what the truth is. So how do we turn this thing around, man?
Well, I'm going to work backwards from the end user, right? Because that's part of the problem. We're a consumer nation, and we've always been a consumer nation. And so if you focus on the end user of the drugs that are being pushed, let's just focus on drugs for the cartels right now.
Okay.
And you could even throw drugs and humans in the same, because they're a commodity. They view them as a commodity. So the end user, like sex trafficking, those sex trafficking users and the drug users, we have to attack that problem first. And those are going to be different attacks, obviously. But on the drug user end, the one thing that you and I both know is that we are never, ever in this country going to arrest our way out of drug usage, right?
Correct.
We're never going to do it. We're just going to arrest people, and it's going to be a vicious cycle.
We've tried that.
Yeah. The war on drugs is it's a joke. So
doesn't work.
No. And so we have to focus on how do we fix that problem, and how we fix that problem is I mean, we have to have community involvement, right? We have to have buy-in from the community. We have to have families that are willing to sacrifice for that family member that is hooked on that dope. And then we have to have treatment programs that actually work and get them back on track. So if we get that piece in place and we start working from that end, at the same time, we start focusing on taking out the pushers of the dope.
Right.
And we, with the designation of narco-terrorism and holding these countries accountable. And
Right.
like Mexico, for instance, telling Mexico, okay, we're going to start sanctioning you. We're going to start going after terrorists in your country. We're going to start holding your corporations and locking down bank accounts and holding them accountable. We start doing all of that at once, and you're going to see this come to a screeching halt. And so it's going to slow down significantly the flow. You're never going to completely stop it.
Right.
It's going to slow it down significantly. We're going to start working on our end users. And the other thing we have to fix is our society. And I don't know how we do that, but
Dude, yeah.
The society piece is this. We have to make it, because if you remember, dude, you've done this for 30 years as well. When DUIs used to be acceptable, and then when DUIs became unacceptable, there was a huge cultural push and there was a flipping of the switch where it was no longer okay for you to drive drunk. Friends would stop friends from driving drunk.
100%, man.
And so we had a huge cultural shift in this country where driving under the influence was no longer socially acceptable. We have to do the same thing with the drug usage, right? Where it's no longer cool. We can't just legalize our way out of it, right?
That's the other approach that some folks are subscribing to. Yeah. And, you know, and just to double down on that, you know, you mentioned family. Yeah, family means more than one parent sometimes that has to get involved, or strong. I think the absence of a strong male figure.
100%, dude. 100%.
It doesn't necessarily need to be the father or the parent, but a strong male figure in the home, mentoring, guiding, and telling people, no, man, we don't do that in this house.
Yeah, and you, whether people in America want to admit this or not, I honestly believe that the push for the whole toxic masculinity and all that crap, that's a minority in our country. Although they're very vocal, it's a minority, and it's obviously hurting us, because masculinity is important. I mean, and if you go back, I'm a guy of faith, and if you look in your good book, it talks about men leading men and being men, because that's what we were designed to be. We're designed to be this way. Women are designed to be this way, and that's the way society works best. And you know, you can look at my family. My wife is much more nurturing, and she plays that role in our family, and I'm kind of the and that's the way that
and there's the balance.
Right. It's the yin and yang, man. You've got to have it. And we need, and this is exactly why I serve in our church, and I serve in our children's ministry, specifically because I believe this so strongly. I believe that male and female children need strong male role models, and that's a huge gap in our country right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think in order for us to not discount that, we got to look in the mirror.
Yep.
And people hate, man, listen, we hate looking in the mirror because you may not like the person you see looking back, and that demands you to take action. That demands you to be better. And we're not just talking about you and me being better. We're talking about an entire country checking themselves and going, you're going to have the kid, man. You need to be there.
Yeah.
You can't, you got to play a role. You got to be involved.
Well, and part of the problem in our country, it's also because our culture is the way it is. We tear each other down more than we build each other up. And that's part of the problem too, because as men, if we're tearing each other down, it makes it even harder to go to the mirror and say, I suck and I need help, and be able to reach out to another man and say, I suck and I need help, bro, and I need you to stand me up.
Right.
That's what we need more of as well.
Oh, 100%, man. You're speaking my language, brother. And you touched on faith, and faith is funny, man. I was listening. So you may know this artist, Jelly Roll, this guy.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm apparently I live under a rock because I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he had this guy on. He's all tatted up, and he said, "Oh, he's got, his songs like speak, like from his rough upbringing and all this." And I'm listening to him singing, and he, I'm chuckling my ass off, hung over in a church pew, and all of his songs are deeply rooted in faith, but to the point where, like this has been his battle, right?
Right.
And so I noticed in the book, at the end of the book, you had that reference, Isaiah 6:8.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, "Who shall I send? Who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." I'm like, yeah, man. There's a recruitment problem in law enforcement. You hear, I would say that there's a recruitment problem in law enforcement and agencies that don't take care of their people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because for us, I can tell you in our agency, we feel the effects of, when you say recruitment problem, we feel the effects of not enough candidates,
Right.
but we are getting people who are drawn to us because they want to work for an organization.
Nobody's jumping ship at Pinal County SO.
No, and we have very few. And when they do, here's the difference between us and other people too. I've seen this happen, and I just don't understand it. Other agencies, I've watched it over and over. When somebody chooses to leave and go somewhere else for whatever their reasons are, they get attacked almost immediately, like blood in the water. And how dare you?
Right.
You're disloyal. You're this or that. We've had people come to us and say, "Hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to this other agency." We're like, "Good for you, man.
Right.
Make your choices. This is your life." And guess what? If it doesn't work out there, or if it isn't what you thought it was, you always have a home here. And
Right.
we've had a couple come back that went to another agency and like, the grass was not greener. And
yeah, right.
Back, and we welcome them back home. And the ones that go and succeed, we say, "Look, we celebrate your success, because your success is because you were here."
Right. We had a part. We played a role in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's the different. I don't know that there's so much of a recruitment issue or a retention issue as there is a leadership issue. Because I know there are agencies in Florida where they don't have vacancies.
Right.
They got good bosses.
Yep.
They got bosses that care about their people. And once you start believing in the caring of others, I think great things happen. And when the organization's leadership adopt that philosophy, like, we serve the community, but we're first servants of our people.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And you've got to create an environment where your people understand that you appreciate them, you value them, that they know that you have a level of humility to where you can have a discussion with any of them at any time, at any level. So one of the best compliments I had in recent days, this was probably a few months back, is one of my buddies who is assigned as an RTO at an academy. And he was like, "Hey, I want to come down, and I want to bring another officer, and we're going to stop by and visit because I'm going to be in the area." Cool. They come up, and we just sit down and we BS for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
And they leave, and it's whatever. And talk to him a little bit later, and he's like, "That other officer was absolutely blown away at what we did." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, the fact that we came up to your office, you stopped everything, we sat down, we talked like normal people, just BS, and then we left. And they said they would never have that type of interaction with their leadership, that it would have been standing up, almost at attention, yes sir, no sir, very brief discussions. And I'm like, well, that sucks, because
isn't that some shit?
Yeah, it was a great compliment though, because I don't want to be an asshole. Like that.
Right.
I care about people, especially my people. I love my people.
Right.
And I want them to not necessarily like me, but I want them to be comfortable enough that they were family, that they know that, hey, if any of my guys or gals had a problem, that I would want them to be comfortable enough to say, Chief, I need help.
Yeah.
And I can help them. So, you know, I just feel that my position is to serve, not to be served.
No, and that's, you know what, Matt, that's I think that's it's multifaceted, the issues that we face, but I think getting back to like what some concrete things that we in this profession as leaders can do is being that person that people can come to, you know,
Right.
asking the why and being part of their solutions. I think for a very long time, you know, we kind of came up at the same time. For a very long time, our commands focused too much on building relationships with the community at the expense of really dialing in with their own people.
Right.
And I think once we do that, right, man, once we have those strong bonds and relationships and connections with our people, like they'll take care of the community, man.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
take
Well,
care of them, they'll take care of the
And
community.
if you look at any company, any you know, company that does well, I'll use the Ritz-Carlton, for example. Ritz-Carlton, when you go there, if you've ever been there, you understand that it's a whole different level of service than
Right.
any other hotel you've ever been to. And that's because the employees actually care about you. And so when you walk into a Ritz-Carlton, you feel special. They make you feel special. And
Yeah.
you want to be around that environment. Well, that's because their employees actually care about you as a customer. And that has nothing to do with the boss at that point. Like, I'm not saying, oh, their boss is great. I'm saying, oh no, that maid that made my room and did something extra for me is great. And by proxy, they are going to endear themselves to that
Yeah,
company
man.
and that leader, right? And so, and it is because of the leadership, because the leadership has set that tone and led that way so that the people in that organization act that way. And it's the same for cops. When we send our deputies out, I'm not the guy having the interaction on a traffic stop.
Right.
It's my deputy out on the street. And if he is happy in his position, happy in his life, and we've given him all the tools he needs and we support him, he's going to do a good job, and he's going to be the representation of the agency. And that's where our community support comes from. It's
Right.
not from me going out and attending some function and just showing my face for 15 minutes. It's
Right.
the work that they do every day in and out.
Right. And if you're enriching his life, he's going to be that ambassador for
Right.
for you and that organization. That's awesome, man. Hey, dude, I'd like to do a part two sometime in the future, man, because I've got one dude, I just like talking with you, man. You we got a similar background. You're solid, man, and you know, you're not what you see is what you get, man. You know, and I love
I
that.
know exactly what you mean, bro.
You know what I mean, man? It's just there's a lot of nonsense out there, brother. And
I
it's
know. That's one of our things that the sheriff and I always tell people is like, look, we're just dudes.
right.
We're just dudes that are filling roles, and we just happen to be the guys in charge. But
Right.
when it gets down to it, I'm just another guy.
Dude, and you're smart enough to know that, bro.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't.
I know.
A lot of people buy their own bullshit, man. And you know, it's just listen, man, you know, it's just that doesn't work. It's never worked.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's easy. I can tell you from this level, it's an easy trap to fall into, because in these roles, you know, you do have people that will just feed that if you allow it to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Hey, listen, if you could leave the guy or gal, man, maybe they're coming home from a shift, maybe they're rolling into work and they've been listening, and you could speak to them directly, man. Something from your heart that you'd like to share, because you know, I don't know if you know this, Matt, but this podcast, thousands of listeners, brother.
Nice, dude. Well, I knew.
Like it's my sister in Mass, like my wife and my daughter. So like, if you could speak to the 5 people that listen to me.
Good. Dude, you got tens of followers. Come on.
That's it, man. I don't discount that, man. I'm the little train that could, brother.
Hey, it's all good, man. We all got to start somewhere.
Oh shit.
But if I could, one thing I could say to those guys and gals out there holding the line, man, is look, don't give up. Even if you have leaders come and leaders go. And
good point.
This work, you and I both know this work is very ebb and flow. right? We have good times, we have bad times. They hate us, they love us. The bad times, I think, help make the good times that much sweeter. So just hang on to what you got. Know that you are needed, because if it's not us, then who's going to do it? And we can't let that happen, right? We got to keep holding the line.
If not me, then who? If not you,
Exactly.
then who, brother?
Right.
That's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Thomas, the book is Interceptors, the Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels. I'll put all that information in the show notes. Matt, brother, man, it's been great, man. I really enjoyed our time together today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And we're going to do a part 2.
Sounds good to me, brother. Thank you.